It's about I gotta say, it's the stupidest thing in sports.
Being able to run as he shoots the moon to the fans here in Green Bay.
That is a disgusting act by Randy Moss.
This is not Detroit, man. This is the Super Bowl. Here we go. Stop from the gun to the touchdown. It is caught. Touchdown.
This is BS Sports.
Good evening, everybody. It is another episode of BS Sports. Seth is out for this week and for a couple of weeks, but don't worry, I will be helming the ship, and the show must go on, regardless of how much I rant and rave about either my Tigers just blowing impossible leads or losing 9 straight. We'll talk about it. We got a great show, though. We got a lot to talk about. So, obviously, last night, headliner right now, the Denver Nuggets win their first NBA championship, but we got a lot more. Vegas, chance to win their first Stanley Cup tonight. They're up 3-1 in that series. Tigers lost 9 straight and then walk off the Braves in extras? I don't know what's going on. I got a few other things to throw in there. Chris Paul being waived by the Suns. Vikings cutting Dalvin Cook. We'll go through it all. We got a couple other things as well. The Big Ten divisions, not a thing anymore, starting in 2024. A lot to talk about. But we got to start with this Nuggets championship. Winning in a gentleman's sweep, 4-1. I got to say, I can't be the only one who was I guess I thought the series was going to be a little bit closer, but the Nuggets, just every game, it seemed, except for game 2 where they lost, they basically just had their way with it. I heard a little bit of rumblings from some people that this final game was a little underwhelming. I kind of get what they're saying. It was obviously a much low scoring. I think it was the lowest scoring game in the series. But I mean, Jokic, that guy, he's unbelievable. And it's like, it didn't matter what they did. His passing ability, his shooting ability, his rebounding ability, it's like there was nothing, even if he wasn't scoring points, he was impacting the game in multiple ways. And the Heat, credit to them. They were an 8th seed. They made it all the way to the finals, but just like the last 8th seed who did that, they did not win the finals. They ended up losing the finals, just like the New York Knicks did in 1999, I think it was. Maybe 98. I don't remember what year it was. It was a long time ago. And overall, though, I would say, like I said, I wish that the series went on just a little bit longer. I wish it could have been kind of milked a little bit. But I'm stoked for the Denver Nuggets. I do find it interesting. Jokic seemed totally uninterested. And I don't know how I would feel about that if I were a Nuggets fan. There's a part of me that's like, I want to see the passion. I want to see the love. But he was just like, oh, like Nikola, you won. You did it for Denver. What is? And it's like, oh, it's good. I can go home now. It's like, dude, Denver just won their first NBA championship in 47 years. They had never even been to a championship, and they win in 5 games. And their first try in the NBA Finals, they win it in 5 games. And you're just like, I can't wait to go home and see my horses. It's like, huh? Who is this guy? And I have a kind of respect for it. Because it's just kind of funny. I mean, like, I can't lie. It's kind of funny. He just basically like ball his life. I mean, like he's just like, I just play basketball. That's what I do. I play basketball, and I guess I'm pretty good at it. I don't know. And obviously won the Finals MVP, very well deserved. I think there was a stat they had on ESPN. He was the lowest drafted Finals MVP in NBA history. Drafted, of course, 41st. I know he was drafted in the second round. And take that what you will. Obviously, certainly one of the most undervalued draft prospects in recent memory, if not ever. He is comparable to Brady in that sense. Not in that he's, the GOAT, but hey, man, I mean, he was first in points, rebounds, and assists in the playoffs, which I think that was another stat that was like first time in the NBA ever. Look, I mean, this Nuggets team is loaded, and, barring injuries, Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr., KCP, obviously Jokic, Christian Brown, Bruce Brown, Aaron Gordon. I mean, obviously, I don't know what their free agency situation looks like. I don't know who they're going to retain, who they're going to lose. But this is a Nuggets team that I think is going to stick around for a little while. And Jokic is, he's not, he's not, an aging veteran. He's still got plenty of basketball left in him. And my only concern would be his general, I don't want to say apathy. That's not the right word. His general just sort of nonchalance about it. Not that he's not competitive or anything like that. It's just that he is just so like, he's a different breed of player. He really is. There's not really a whole lot of players like him in the NBA. And I think I'm pretty welcome to it. I'm happy to see, non-drama queen or generally speaking cancerous or toxic personalities being really popular in the NBA. And it's awesome to see a franchise like Denver, which is a very historic franchise that has never really been able to get anything right in their history, to finally be able to get over the hump and win that NBA championship. I've said on the show, I love seeing teams that have never won or never been win championships, and Denver was both. They'd never been to an NBA Finals, and they never won, and they finally did it, and that's really awesome to see. The other interesting stat regarding the Finals, this is now the 5th team in 5 years to win the NBA Finals. You had, obviously, this year the Nuggets, prior year the Warriors, prior year the Bucks, prior year the Lakers, and then the year prior to that, the Toronto Raptors. So you got 5 teams from 5, except for LA and Golden State, 5 different geographic areas. I mean, Toronto. And a lot of these teams are also winning their first championships either in franchise history or in a long time. So you had, I mean, with the exception of course, of LA and Golden State. But even then, LA had a decently long championship drought, to be fair to them. But, Toronto winning their first title. LA, like I said, decently long drought. Milwaukee winning their first title in like 50 years since Kareem played for them. Warriors. I mean, they were probably, if I were to pick a team that people were like the least okay with winning, I don't know if that's even accurate. Probably the Warriors, just because they had the shortest drought compared to any of these other teams. And then, of course, the Denver Nuggets, who had never even been. So, look, the league is in good shape in terms of generating new champions. I hope that it stays this way because, as fun as dynasties are for the fan base of the team, they're really not fun for the rest of the league. The mid to late 2010s, where it was just every year it was just the Golden State Warriors and the Cleveland Cavaliers. That was just misery. That was terrible because it was just like, oh, all right, just get to the finals so we can just have Steph and LeBron, and Steph won a lot of those matchups except for the one, especially post KD. Golden State was just dominating the league, and it was just probably I mean, maybe we're entering into a new era of the league, and my fear would be that the Nuggets become the new Warriors, where it's just okay, yeah, Western Conference, yeah, who's gonna try to beat the Nuggets, which would suck. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, I still really like Jokic. I still really like their team. They're no nonsense. They're all about ball. There's no drama on that team. Coach Malone, excellent job, and I don't know. It just seems like that's a team that's very focused on basketball and basketball alone, not, getting into nonsense. And that's really, really welcoming to see. So, yeah, I think that's where we'll move on a little bit from the NBA to the NHL, where Vegas also holds a stranglehold on the Florida Panthers, taking a 3-1 series lead after winning in Florida. It was a last second. It went down to the wire. I mean, Florida nearly coming back, and unfortunately unable to do so for Florida Panthers fans. But right now, I mean, you're dealing with, a 3-1 lead, and that's pretty insurmountable. But Florida has overcome a 3-1 lead in this very playoffs. They did it against the Boston Bruins, obviously in the first round, and what was at that point probably the biggest upset in the playoffs. And I mean, can they do it again? Probably not. I mean, like, and I don't mean to be, a negative Nancy or anything like that, but it's tough because there's also reports Matty Tkachuk had upper body injury. I don't even know if he's going to play tonight. And not that he has been like super, impactful in this series, but no, I mean, like, I think Vegas, they're, obviously they're back in Vegas tonight. And look, I mean, I don't hate either of these teams. It's going to be cool to see, one of them will win their first ever Stanley Cup, which is really good to see. It's really great for the game of hockey. But I don't know. I would have rather seen Florida win just because they're an older franchise as opposed to Vegas is relatively new franchise. But I don't know. I kind of go back and forth because with Vegas, it's like, wow, a brand new franchise just shows how quickly you can move up in the ranks in the NHL, how quickly parity can become a factor for a team. And, they start at 8 p.m. tonight, so we'll see. I don't know if I'll stick around for the whole thing. I probably won't, just because I'm not a Vegas or a Florida fan, so it wouldn't really make any sense. But, I think this series probably could end tonight. And it's going to be unfortunate because, you had Bobrovsky, who was having an amazing playoffs. You had Matthew Tkachuk, again, amazing playoffs. This Florida team, this scrappy underdog. But like a lot of underdogs, they actually lose a lot more than they win. So I don't know. There's not really much else to say on that front. Just hoping for Florida to win and make the series a little interesting. And I believe Game 7, if it reaches 7, would be Sunday. I think so. So yeah, could be interesting. But speaking of hockey, I spent the weekend, or I should say Sunday evening, watching the Once Upon a Time in Anaheim documentary. I was going to talk about this with Seth, but seeing as he'll be gone for the next 3 weeks, including this week, kind of unfortunate because, it's a documentary about his team, the Anaheim Not So Mighty Ducks, their whole origin. I don't know. I thought it was kind of interesting. Obviously, I didn't realize just how much they lost to the Red Wings. I don't mean to put it that way, but they really did lose to the Red Wings a lot in the late 90s and early 2000s. I guess it's kind of interesting, though. I would have loved to see his, his being Seth's reaction to it. It's an interesting story. They started as, an expansion team bought by Disney. And they named it after the movie, which had come out, I think, maybe a couple of years prior. And they ended up being a pretty darn good team, winning a Stanley Cup in 2007, I believe. But by that time, Disney had sold the team. That's what I was so surprised about, was just how short-lived the Mighty Ducks were. I was like, what? They really weren't the Mighty Ducks for that long? Which sucks, right? Because I love their old what's the word? Branding. First of all, the Mighty Ducks of Anaheim is just one of the all-time great names, I think, in sports. And to just become the Anaheim Ducks is like, oh, that's kind of lame. It's like you took away the mighty. You took away their might. They're not mighty anymore. They're just regular ducks. And then ironically enough, you get rid of their might, and actually they win a Stanley Cup after that. Yeah. So that was it was a good documentary, though. Ultimately, it was really well made and just pretty compelling. So I would check it out if you're a hockey fan. Even if you don't care about the Anaheim Ducks, or even if you're not a hockey fan, this is the thing about these E60s. These documentaries are good ways to get into the sport because you learn about the storylines, you learn about some of the teams, some of the great players. Paul Correa. I'm pretty sure I'm pronouncing that right. Paul Correa. I didn't know what Paul Correa was. I gotta admit that. And I thought his storyline was just really cool. And so yeah, I thought it was a really well made documentary. Would like to see more of these E60s based on hockey. Obviously, the Red Wings got one with the Colorado Avalanche rivalry. I don't really know that there would be much more you could do with the Detroit team. At least in terms of hockey. I'm trying to think of other there is the Lions. They have a lot of documentary footage or material that you could use. The thing with the Lions, though, is I think they have to win a Super Bowl in order for their documentary to truly be an all-time great. Because if you just leave it on, where they're at now, where, they look like they're probably going to be a pretty darn good team this year. But, what if they don't? And then it's just oh, well, this feels kind of unfortunate. Sorry, I got to adjust my hat because it is not quite. I don't. This hat is odd. It tries. I don't know what happens, but it becomes not the right tightness. I don't know if that's the right word. Not the right adjustment, which doesn't make any sense because it's like a button, right? So I don't know how this works. So hopefully that's better. Yes, that is much better. But yeah, really enjoyed that documentary, and ESPN E60, they continue to show that sort of just good stuff. As far as other Detroit documentaries, there really isn't a whole lot. You could do maybe one on Miguel Cabrera. I'm sure that would be pretty interesting. His time in Florida, and obviously he had the alcohol problems when he was in Detroit. I don't know. he's one of the all-time greats, so I wouldn't be surprised if a documentary is made about him in 5 to 10 years down the line. But I don't know. I don't know. Moving on to other things. I wanted to get to actually let's hit a little NBA news. So I got a couple of stories here, and we're gonna start with what I teased at the beginning. Where's the ad? Oh, okay. This is not. Is this what is happening? Where's the story? What is the? I, okay, well, I guess regardless, I can just. I don't. I don't know what's going on. Little technical difficulties over here. I'm not gonna read any of the story, I guess, because there is no story, and CBS's website is weird. Chris Paul. Chris Paul was waived by the Phoenix Suns, and I don't know what their plan is at all. Like the Phoenix Suns went from being, obviously they fire Monty Williams, and now they're waiving Chris Paul. So, he could come back if he clears waivers, but I mean, I don't know what the situation is. And I put in the show notes, just, because we have Pistons fan and myself, and then a Bucks fan and Seth. I put in the show notes, what do we think about one of our teams landing Chris Paul? So I don't know how the waiver wire works in the NBA. I'm assuming it's like, there's some sort of hierarchy, but I don't know if it's based on record or some other thingamabob. I don't know how much of it works. But I thought it was kind of interesting given, the Suns went, and crapped the bed again, but not really Chris Paul's fault. He got hurt once again. And now you have, a few situations that he could find himself in. I look at, even I know this is crazy, but I look at the Pistons and it's like, well, it's a young team and they're looking for a vet, and it's your former coach who you probably really like. I wouldn't totally rule out the Pistons as a possible landing spot. Now, of course, Chris Paul is looking to compete for a championship. So I think in that regard, he would say, no, I would, as much as he would like to play again for Monty Williams, he probably is thinking, he's only got, 2, maybe 3 more years in his career before he calls it quits. He's probably thinking about a team like the Boston Celtics, or I put this in the show notes, maybe the Milwaukee Bucks. I don't know. I don't know about salary cap situation. I don't know about spending. I don't know about any of that. I'm just talking about fits. I'm talking about, who makes the most sense. What teams would be interesting? And I think the Milwaukee Bucks would be a really interesting fit. Team needs another good player to kind of put some of the pressure off of Giannis. I think Chris Paul's still got a lot of or maybe not a lot of basketball, but he's still got basketball skill. He's still a threat to go off on a team. Now, obviously, there's injury concerns and age concerns and, choking in the playoffs concerns. But, I think the Bucks could be an interesting fit. I think what's most possible, though, is probably the Celtics, which not my favorite choice. But, I mean, he would be a vet in that room of players who need that leadership and that example, because Jason Tatum, he's really not that guy. He's really not a leader for that team. And Jaylen Brown certainly is not a leader. And Marcus Smart is Marcus average intelligence when it comes to leadership. And yeah, I mean, I think it would be an interesting fit for sure. As far as whether it would work out, I'm kind of skeptical. I like Chris Paul as a player, I guess. Like, he's a fine player, but he just sort of bothers me with how much he loses in the playoffs, in that, I think he's lost 2-0 leads 5 times more than any other NBA player. And I know people will say, well, he got hurt, or, he had to play on the Hornets or what, like he was on a bad team, whatever, or he wasn't even the best player, whatever, what have you. I mean, my thing is nobody else has done that. It's just you. You're on an island. And whether or not you're 100% at fault or 50% or 25% or 1% or no percent, that sort of thing does kind of weigh on people, or it weighs on your mind if you're a player, right? Because you're thinking, oh, here we go. Here goes again. Just like every other time, we're going to blow it. Something's going to happen. I'm going to get hurt. I'm going to, not show up. I'm going to play poorly. And obviously, he's at the point in his physicality where he probably is more prone to getting hurt. And he can't help it. He's close to 40 years old. He's closer to 40 than he is to 20. So it sucks because, it's a very large possibility that he retires without a championship. He'd be another all-time great player who doesn't end up winning a ring, and that severely harms. I mean, I don't really like to get into the legacy thing. I look at players like, what kind of a player were you statistically speaking, and just how much did you win? And that sort of thing is like, well, it's going to affect his legacy, obviously. And having no championship affects his legacy, just like it affects, Charles Barkley's legacy or Karl Malone's legacy. It affects players' legacies, no doubt. I just don't really. I still look at players and I'm like, this guy's an all-time great. I mean, you're not gonna. If he won one championship, would that change things? Maybe. Honestly, it's almost better now that I'm thinking about it. It's almost better to win no championships than to just win one. And the reason I feel for that is because if you win just one championship, then you're just a one-hit wonder, right? You're just, oh, whatever. You only got one. You're not even that good. How many players have gotten multiple? It's like, if you win none, then it's like, oh, well, what could have been? They were so good. They just got unlucky. Whereas once you get to the one, it's like the narrative changes. It's like, oh, you only got one. You just got to, like, if Giannis only ends up winning the one championship, guarantee you that's going to be he won the 1 year, but who cares, right? I mean, it's like Aaron Rodgers in the NFL. Aaron Rodgers, one of the all-time great quarterbacks, and that pains me as a Lions fan to have to say that. One of the all-time great quarterbacks. He's won one Super Bowl, and that definitely affects his legacy, especially considering that he's had multiple playoff failings, and the same thing would apply with Chris Paul, whether it's blowing leads or just not showing up. But yeah, I thought it was an interesting little spin with Chris Paul, and being cleared. I was a little shocked by that because I figure if you're the Suns, you're not in the business necessarily of getting rid of anybody. You're in the business of probably adding some pieces. You already replaced your coach. I don't know. I guess I was surprised by that. But what are you gonna do? Wanted to move on to this other story here. Some NBA rumors regarding the Pistons. Jeremy Grant and Cam Johnson among Pistons targets in free agency. So this is from Mike Chiari. I don't know if that's accurate, but obviously Jeremy Grant, former Detroit Piston, now on the Portland Trail Blazers. He will be a free agent, I guess, or maybe a restricted free agent. Cam Johnson will be a restricted free agent with the Brooklyn Nets. Now, I want to talk about both these guys individually. So first, let's talk about Jeremy Grant, because I'm probably more familiar with Jeremy Grant than I am with Cam Johnson. So Jeremy Grant is a decent ball player. He's decent. He's not great. He's decent. In his career, he's got 12, 4, and 1. That's 12 points, 4 rebounds, 1 assist. Last year had a pretty darn good year. 20 points, 4.5 rebounds, 2 boards, about 2.5 boards. When he was with the Pistons, he only played a couple of years with the Pistons, but they were pretty productive. 20 points, looks like a looks like 4 boards and 2.5 rebounds. Pretty good numbers. He was one of our more consistent shooters. But as far as a player, I mean, he's never really been that great. And the thing is, if he was like really good with us, I would be more okay with bringing him back. But the thing is, he wasn't that great with us. He was good. He was definitely one of the better players on the team. But I'm not a huge fan of bringing guys back, especially if we're talking about a regime that already got rid of them. It's like you already let him go. Like, what was the point then of letting him go only to bring him back? And I think we traded him, so we got something there. But I don't know. It just wouldn't really feel right. I can't imagine Jeremy Grant would really be that interested in coming back to the Pistons. Especially when he got a taste of a different organization and got to play with Dame Lillard. And, obviously the Trailblazers were not very good this year, but, it is a different organization. But Cam Johnson, on the other hand, is a name that I like in terms of, for one, he's much younger. He is 27 as opposed to 29. So he's got a couple of years. His career numbers are better: 11 points, 3 boards, and 1.5 assists. His numbers this year, not as good: 15.5 points, 4 boards, and 1 assist. But he has a history with head coach Monty Williams. Played for Phoenix for 5 seasons. 1, 2, 3, 4 seasons, excuse me. Was then traded in the Kevin Durant trade. And I mean, I would not be surprised if he was more than willing to come back on to play with Monty Williams. Like, he is a guy who already has a reputation. I wouldn't necessarily consider him a veteran, although he is going to be 28. But I think he's a guy that could be getting a lot of playing time on this Pistons team. And he was a player for them when they went to the finals. Like, with Jeremy Grant, he's just never been on any really successful teams. So he doesn't really know what it's like to be that sort of player. The thing about Cam Johnson is obviously being a restricted free agent, we're going to have to match Brooklyn's offer for him, which is probably going to be pretty hefty, which means we probably overpay for Cam Johnson. But I think Cam Johnson would be an immediate upgrade for this team, and I would wholeheartedly welcome that, especially given his past history with Monty Williams. And, you add Cam Johnson to a team with Cade Cunningham. I was going to say Sadiq Bey. Sadiq Bey got traded. Isaiah Stewart, I guess. What's his name? Said, why am I blanking? Jalen Duren and Jaden Ivey. I don't know why I was blanking on that. But yeah, I think he would be a definite upgrade, definite, piece to this team. And the Pistons are in desperate need for something. And look, is Cam Johnson a superstar? Is he bringing it? Is he selling season tickets? No. But Cam Johnson's a pretty darn good ball player. And he's somebody that you can rely on day in and day out to go out and have effective basketball. A guy who could probably like his numbers this year, get you 15 points a game. That's pretty good. That's not like pedestrian. And when you compare that to a lot of the guys on our team that are either aging vets that you're not keeping, you get a 27-year-old who's got 15 points a game. Those are players. And I go back to, the Nuggets. They had guys like Bruce Brown. They had guys like Aaron Gordon or Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. These guys weren't averaging, 25 points a game. Even Michael Porter Jr. was not averaging that many points, especially in the finals. They were solid ball players. They were pieces to an already core of guys. Now, obviously, this is all assuming that Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, and Jalen Duren are who we think they are. Obviously, I don't think Cade Cunningham is going to be Jokic. I don't think anybody's going to be Jokic. For one, he doesn't have the physical build, and for two, we've never seen him perform at such a level that Jokic had performed at. I don't expect him to be that. But if he is, what's the word? If he is the equivalent, if he is the proportionate equivalent, I don't know if that makes any sense. What I mean is, Jokic is the leader of the Nuggets. He's the best player on the Nuggets. He's a, 20 plus points per game kind of guy. He's a superstar in this league. If Cade Cunningham is that superstar for us, that automatically propels this team. It means we are building a team around Cade Cunningham. We're giving him Jaden Ivey. We're giving him Jalen Duren, who gives both a defensive and board presence on this team. And you add a Cam Johnson. You add some other who, if you end up drafting a number 5. I don't know if that's what your plan is, but you throw in honestly, even a guy like Isaiah Stewart is not like amazing, but if he continues to kind of develop and be a decent 5th, maybe 6th option on the bench, he could be an all right ball player. But you also have, you have guys like Marvin Bagley and James Wiseman. And I say those names with some sarcasm embedded in there because, well, those guys have really not ever been that for any of the teams they played for. But clearly, Troy Weaver, the general manager, sees something in these guys. He is taking how do I put this? He is taking a lot of the misfit toys of the NBA and he's trying to put something together here. And we'll see if it works out. But the thing is, I think with Monty Williams as the coach, that is going to further elevate any of the players that we bring in, including our own players, which is exactly what this Pistons team needs. We need some sort of step forward. And Troy Weaver even said in the press conference with the new coach today, he said this team, is ready to take a step forward next year. And those are big words because this team has not taken a step forward since he has taken over in GM. In fact, it has taken steps back as it did this year. So look, he's looking. He thinks this team is ready to take a step forward, and I think he could be right, especially with the addition of Monty Williams. And you bring Cade Cunningham. Hopefully, he'll be healthy for at least most of this year. Hopefully, the whole year. I don't necessarily expect him to play 82 games, but I certainly would love to see him play all 82 games. That would be great. I know it's such a strange concept to expect our NBA players to play all 82 games. I know it's weird. It's not an easy thing to do. Most players don't end up doing that, let alone, your star. But anyway, yeah. So I don't know. I would be, if they get Jeremy Grant, okay. He's decent. He's a pretty good player, but he doesn't really have a whole lot of upside at this point. He's got no history with Monty Williams. I mean, Cam Johnson to me is the much better fit. I would much rather have Cam Johnson. I don't really like reunions of players when the player is not that good. Like, it'd be one thing if, like, I don't know, let's just, faux example, it'd be one thing if, like, say the Pistons let Isaiah Thomas or something, say they let Isaiah Thomas, they traded him 1 year on his contract year, and then they decided to bring him back. It's like, well, Isaiah Thomas is still a great player, so I don't really care. Same with right now the Tigers with the situation with Eduardo Rodriguez. They traded Eduardo Rodriguez in the next year in free agency. Go ahead and pick him back up. I'm not upset. Eduardo Rodriguez is a pretty darn good pitcher. I mean, like, that'd be the best of both worlds. You trade him, you get some assets for him, and then, hey, Eduardo, why don't you come back and sign with us? We'll give you a new contract. We'll go to work. I don't know. But Jeremy Grant is not comparable to the impact that Eduardo Rodriguez has on the Tigers or that any really good player would have on the Pistons. He really was just sort of he was a good player on a bad team. What are you going to do? That's just sort of what he is. And yeah, I got nothing further to add. I would much rather have Cam Johnson. That's the guy that I'm looking for, unless we just go crazy and make a crazy big splash and we get someone like Jaylen Brown. That would be, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. And obviously, I alluded to it with the Chris Paul being waived. We'll see what happens because I don't know. Like, there's a lot of things that could surprise people in the offseason. I mean, nobody expected Donovan Mitchell to the Cavs last year. We'll see what happens. But we have another story of a player being cut, released, waived, whatever you want to call it. From Tom Pelissero on Twitter. This was just a few days ago, June the 8th. The Vikings 4-time Pro Bowler running back Dalvin Cook parting ways with the Vikings. Now, this to me was, well, for one, it was just great news because, that automatically makes the Vikings a worse team. It does. Like Dalvin Cook, one of the top running backs in the league for sure. And then, you know, when we played against him, he didn't really look all that effective. But, generally speaking, he's a pretty darn good football player. And I don't really know what the Vikings are. Now, here's my thing. I understand if you're like, we don't want to pay a running back what he's asking. These sorts of deals usually don't work out if you're not absolutely, primed to contend in that particular year, or if that running back is just, the best in the league. And even then, not even really a good strategy in my opinion. But with Dalvin Cook leaving, like I said, the Vikings are automatically worse. They just are. And it means that the Lions have furthered the gap. If the gap already existed, they have furthered that gap, I think, between their team and the Vikings. And the Vikings, obviously, they won the division last year. And they got worse. I mean, their defense was, as far as I'm aware, not really all that improved. Now their offense is not as improved. They're pretty much running it back. They lose Thielen as well, so their offense is definitely not improved. If anything, it is worse. So I think this year for the Vikings is not a tank year, but kind of a retooling year. Just sort of, cutting off some of the guys that you had and seeing what you can do with some of the pieces you want to keep around long term. With the Justin Jeffersons, with I don't even know what the deal with TJ Hawkinson is. Because TJ Hawkinson, I think, is on a contract year. Like he needs to get paid this offseason. So they'll probably see what they're going to do with him. But look, I mean, this Dalvin Cook news, this shocked me just because of the caliber of player that Dalvin Cook is. But as far as fits for him, I've been seeing a lot of Miami. I think he probably ends up in Miami, and that makes Miami a very scary team. And I know they were a scary team before, but that team goes as far as Tua goes. And if Tua stays healthy, if Tua does not get murdered on the field like he did last year, I don't mean to laugh because it wasn't funny. He could have seriously been hurt. But, if he can stay healthy, Miami can be a very scary team in the AFC. And that's a loaded AFC East, I believe. That's right. Yeah, that's right. A loaded AFC East division with, obviously the addition of Aaron Rodgers to the Jets and I guess the Patriots and Josh Allen and the Bulls, the Bills. If they get Dalvin Cook, I might kind of lean on them winning that division. Not that it would be an easy win, but on paper, they are a pretty darn good team, especially offensively. I don't really know about their defense. I can't really speak to it. I just don't know enough of their roster. But, yeah, look out for the Miami Dolphins for Dalvin Cook. And now, I mean, I've been saying the Lions are going to win the NFC North, and I think the loss of Dalvin Cook for the Vikings is just all the more adds to that. Ironically, in a weird way, the only team look, Minnesota still has a lot of talent. They still have Justin Jefferson. They still have, Kirk Cousins. Honestly, I don't even know. Like, I'm not trying. TJ Hawkinson's a decent ball player, but like, I don't really know. Like, Justin Jefferson is a scary man. I know Justin Jefferson is a scary man. Now, granted, in the game that he went off against us, we ended up winning the game. So I'm not that intimidated by it, but I am pretty intimidated by him. But Kirk Cousins, I mean, he is at least as frightening a quarterback as Jared Goff is. But I think Jared Goff is surrounded by a much better team, much better run game. I think way more weapons for him to throw to, and a much better defense. So, I mean, as unscary, as unfrightening as Jared Goff is or Kirk Cousins is, the teams that they play for are vastly different. So I think this only adds to the situation that the Lions are probably going to win this division. And what's kind of sad is just looking at the schedule. So they put the Lions Vikings in 3 weeks. Both of our matchups are 3 weeks from one another, where we play, I think, on the road and then Denver and then at home. I could be wrong. Could have flipped those, but I know that we play them in the last 3 weeks. But if they're like not good, like heaven forfend, they're like really bad. Gonna be awkward for the NFL because that final game is TBD as far as time, which makes sense. I think they do that for all teams. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure they do that for all teams just in case, obviously they don't really know who's going to be good, if a player gets injured, if, maybe a team that was projected to be really good ends up being really bad, or a team that was projected to be bad ends up being really good. They leave that open so that they can be like, okay, we're gonna flex this Sunday night game or this Monday night game or what have you. But I don't know. I think the loss of Dalvin Cook is sort of like the straw that broke the camel's back for me for the Vikings, where I'm just like, I don't know what your direction is. I don't know if you're like, I just don't know. Like, I don't really know what you're doing. Like, you won the division, you made the playoffs, you won, 13 games, maybe 12 games, and you're just sort of letting pieces go. I don't really, I'm not saying you run it back necessarily, but I figure you add. I figure you try to make the team better, but it just sort of seems like they're like, no, actually, this new regime, no, we don't really feel confident about some of these cats on this team. No pun intended. We don't really feel confident about some of these guys on this team, so we're gonna move along. But I don't know, Vikings fans. I don't know what's going on with your team, and I'm loving every minute of it. If I could be perfectly honest. But moving on then from that, I guess before we get to Tigers, or Tigers aren't on right now because they're in a weather delay because it rained apparently pretty bad in Detroit, and it didn't rain like at all here. I don't know. I'm not living in Detroit right now, but it didn't rain, and apparently it rains, so they're in a weather delay. And look, the Tigers. This is a rough week. Okay, so they went out and they lost 9 straight games. 9 in a row. I posted the video of the clip last week after the Riley Green injury, talking about just how down bad the Tigers are. But 9 games in a row, start a month. They didn't win a single game in the month of June until yesterday. Now, I want you to think. Okay, this is your stat that I heard today. That was or maybe not today, maybe like last week. I think it was today. Or maybe yesterday. I don't remember when I heard it. I heard it at some point. Do you want to know the last time that the Tigers opened up a month and lost 9 straight? 2003? 2019? Sometime in the 90s? None of those are accurate. It was never. That's right. It was never. For the first time in franchise history, the Tigers lost 9 straight to open a month. We witnessed history in these opening days of the month of June. We witnessed history in the worst sense of the word. We witnessed ineptitude on levels that is borderline illegal, perhaps cruel and unusual punishment we need to invoke. I believe that is the 8th Amendment. I don't know which amendment it is. The one involving cruel and unusual punishment, we may need to invoke that to stop the Detroit Tigers from playing. Now, I'm going to give them credit. They had a good win last night, but I mean, I don't anticipate, if they play the game tonight, I don't anticipate they're going to come back and do that again, because it was, all things considered, a bit fluky. But Spencer Torkelson had a pretty good night, so that was good to see. But that's the thing about baseball, though. We lose 9 games. We were the coldest team in the MLB, in Major League Baseball. And then we just walk off one of the best teams in the league. Like, we just walk off the Atlanta Braves after being down 4 or 5-1 or 5-2. We were down 5-2 entering the 9th inning, and we come back. It's unbelievable. It really is. But look, the Tigers right now, they're just in a downward spiral, and I don't anticipate them coming back from it. Maybe they win a couple of series. Maybe, I mean, like, my thing is, and I think I've been saying this on the show for a while. My thing is, I am interested in the players that I anticipate keeping along, which are Torkelson, Green. I don't know who else. Like, I really don't. Maybe Kerry Carpenter. Maybe Reese Olson. He's going to be potentially pitching tonight. He's a pretty young player, and he's had a pretty good start. Maybe some of the other pitchers, Tarek Skubal, Casey Mize. Casey Mize isn't going to play this year, but I'm not really that sold on any of the players that we have right now, other than, yeah, they're pretty all right. You know, there's some players that are like, not too bad. Like, we have a few players that are horrendously bad. Believe me, I know. We have Javier Baez, who swings and misses at pitches that are probably in other ballparks, just by how far they are off the plate. But I look at the Tigers, and I just look at a team that is, they need a whole lot of work, and Scott Harris has got a lot to do in terms of loading up this system, in terms of acquiring talent through free agency and through trades and what have you. But I had this epiphany. I don't know if that's the right word. I had this thought that, this division is pretty weak. The Tigers were like a game and a half out of the division just a couple of weeks ago. And obviously it was never really real. But you'd think if you'd go through an offseason, is it possible that this team wins an eviction next year? Is it possible? Well, it's always possible, right? You start the year 0-0. I think when you look at the other, teams, you look at the Guardians, who are, they couldn't develop a power hitter if their life depended on it, not name Jose Ramirez. And you look at the White Sox, who are directionless. You look at the Royals, who are equally directionless. And the Twins, again, directionless. Teams that have no direction, that have no culture, that have no anything. There's nothing about those teams where you look at them and you can identify what it is they're trying to do. I don't know what the Twins are doing. They're winning the division because somebody's got to win. And the White Sox, they theoretically have talent. I'm not totally convinced of that, but theoretically they do. The Royals, again, theoretically have some talent. Bobby Witt Jr., but he's basically been a no-show this year. And a lot of their other young pieces also pretty much like Brady Singer having a really not good year. Same with a few of their other players. And I'm honestly a little surprised with the Royals. I thought maybe they were going to take a step forward this year, but they just, my point of saying all this, if Scott Harris is the best GM, the best president of baseball, or whatever you want to call it, if he's the best GM in this division, I don't see why it's totally unreasonable to believe that next year in a team with a probably overhauled roster, because I just think of the guys you're not going to have. You're not going to have Miguel Cabrera. You're not going to have Jonathan Scope. You're probably not going to have Jake Rogers or Eric Haas. Maybe you have one of them, but you won't have both of them. You're probably not going to have Nick Maton, I would hope. You're probably not going to have Andy Ibanez. You're probably not going to have even potentially Zach Short. I don't know what his situation is. Point is, a lot of these players you're probably not going to have. And you're also going to have a lot of players back from injury. So you're going to have potentially, Tarek Skubal, depending on I don't know if we'll trade him. I don't know what the situation is on that. You're certainly going to have Casey Mize, Matt Manning as well. So that was the supposed three-headed monster that the Tigers were going to bring up in terms of pitching. You probably won't have Eduardo Rodriguez. He's probably either going to opt out or you're going to trade him. Or, like I said earlier in the show, you could trade him and you could sign him back and, he could be a piece on this pitching staff. But you're also not going to have Michael Lorenzen. And I mean, I'm not trying to disparage necessarily any of these players because some of them are decent. Some of them are good. Michael Lorenzen has been good. Eduardo Rodriguez has been good. Zach Shorter's been good. But the team is going to look a whole lot different. And a lot of the dead weight, especially in Miguel Cabrera and Jonathan Schoop, and either or both of these catchers, and Andy Ibanez, who granted had a pretty nice game last night, actually a really nice game last night, but generally not really, a long-term solution as far as bats go. But who knows? I mean, he's also 30 years old, so he's probably not got much of a future with us. And you think of guys that we have in our system. We got Colt Keith, who's been absolutely raking at Double-A. You have Justin Emery-Malloy, who granted has been into a bit of a slump in Triple-A, but I'm sure he could probably bounce back. He's had a pretty good year with them overall, just because he had a monster April. And I also think of any of the trades that we make, and we will be making trades at the deadline. Whatever we get back from that, it's going to change the outlook of this team pretty quickly. And look, whether or not, winning the division is quote unquote good for the long-term success of the team. I mean, look, if next year you can push yourself to winning the division, I don't see how that's a bad thing. I mean, you're going to have another year of Riley Green. Hopefully, once he comes back, he's going to be as good as he was in the month of May, pretty consistently. Hopefully, Spencer Torkelson can start to turn on that power as we saw last night. And you look at it and you're like, we have little things. We need that certified dog, right? Torkelson's a good player. I don't know if he's going to be the certified dog. Riley Green's a good player. I don't know if he's a certified dog. We need that kind of superstar kind of bat. That bat that comes up to the lineup and you're basically, you're most of the time you're like, okay, this guy's up in the lineup. We're probably going to score here. Whether it's home run, double, triple, RBI single, walk even. Like, he's a guy who's going to get on base. He's going to hit for power, all that jazz. We need that kind of guy. We need a Ronald Acuna. We need an Aaron Judge. I don't know. We need a guy like that. And I think also we could make some moves in the offseason in terms of free agency. For one, we're going to have a whole lot of payroll with Miguel Cabrera finally getting off of the books. And, Eduardo Rodriguez most likely getting off the books and Jonathan Schoop getting off of the books. Now, it all comes down to whether or not Chris Ilitch wants to spend. But look, I think for Tigers fans, I look at the Arizona Diamondbacks, 2021. They were terrible. They were a 100-loss plus team. Now they're looking like one of the most up and coming, if not the best team in the NL right now. So I don't know. I'm not in the total despair mode that I once was in with this team. Not that this year is going to change. This year it's terrible. And Javier Baez is just continuing to prove that he is one of the worst contracts in baseball, if not ever. So yeah, it's fun. It's fun here in Tiger Nation. But we move on then from the Tigers to the last little segment I wanted to get to here, which is some of the news regarding the Big Ten and MSU. So first was a tweet from Alejandro Zuniga. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. I don't know who this person is, but apparently they tweeted this out. So starting in 2024, the Big Ten football championship game will feature the top 2 teams overall in the conference standings. At the end of the regular season, no more divisions. Now, I don't know if I'm in the minority here. I probably am. I don't hate divisions. I know there's a lot of people in every league who just, get rid of the divisions, just make it's so ridiculous. My thing is the divisions add a little bit of spice, right? It adds it so that it's not, and I get what people are saying, right? Obviously, you want the best teams in the league to be playing in any championship, right? Or playing for a championship. You don't want, the 8 and 9 Bucks to go in and get creamed in the playoffs, because that's just not very fun. Were they 8 and 9? Yeah, they were 8 and 9. Or whatever, what have you. But on the flip side, my thing with the divisions is it adds some sort of, what's the word? I don't know, like spice. I don't know. It makes it so that it's not just like so there's only one way to do things, right? You can be that kind of underdog team who sneaks into the playoffs and then out of nowhere just turns it on at the right point. And you get those fun little storylines. And just in terms of, I know people have totally just thrown this out of the window. In terms of geography, you're going to get teams from all over the country with the division. You just are. You're not going to get, 10 New York teams. I don't know. I know that's not necessarily always the case, and that's usually not the case, but you know what I mean. You're not going to get, teams all from the South or all from the North or whatever part of the country is just better with the divisions. It at least enforces that, you're going to have some level of diversity. And I think the NBA actually can serve as a bit of a foil against what I'm saying because, they pretty much the divisions in that are pretty much meaningless. They're meaningful in terms of seeding, but with the play-in and everything, you pretty much do get teams from all over. But with the divisions, you guarantee that, and that's just my point. So I don't really care so much. I'm not like this is terrible. I can't believe they get rid of divisions. I'm just saying I think like this narrative that people have about how divisions need to be totally destroyed. They're so useless, and I don't like them at all. I'm just not on that board. But the thing that I found interesting, so they also posted this on the Big Ten website. So 2024 and 2025 2-play opponents. So let me read this directly from their website. Under the new Flex Protect Plus scheduling model, schools have 2-play opponents. They'll be played both home and away in 2024 and 2025, including protected opponents that will be played annually beyond the 2025 season. So you can't see it, but the 2-play opponents are in blue and the protected opponents are in white. And like I said, the 2-play opponents will be played both home and away in 2024 and 2025. And the protected opponents will be played annually beyond the 2025 season. So from just basically for as much as possible. But I believe they pointed out, I don't know if it's in this article. I'm pretty sure it is, but I can't see if I can find it really quickly. Yeah, here. The guaranteed annual protection matchups, blah, 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 blah. The other 2-play opponents for each member institution will change every 2 years. So basically, the teams that are in blue, the 2-play opponents, those are teams that you can flip out every 2 years. So just going through the Big Ten here. I'm not gonna go through the whole Big Ten. That's a lot of teams, and I'd have to do a lot of talking. I'll go over Michigan and Michigan State. So Michigan, 2024, their 2-play opponent, they have just one. That is the University of Maryland. Go Terps. And then their protected opponents are Michigan State and Ohio State, obviously. Their 2 biggest rivals in the Big Ten. Makes perfect sense. The Maryland is kind of interesting. I mean, Maryland is kind of an interesting football team. They're usually not all that good, but they got Baby Tua. So I don't know. Maybe Baby Tua will show things. Will showcase his stuff this year. But the Michigan State one, this one I find to be interesting. So Michigan is obviously our protected opponent because they protected. You already heard that. But we have two play opponents, and that is the University of Indiana, go Hoosiers, and the University or Penn State University, go Nittany Lions. So Indiana, I think both of these are some sort of trophies for MSU. I think it was Penn State is the land grant, and Indiana is something like a bowl or something. I don't remember what it is. It's something interesting. And by interesting I mean dumb, but that's not here nor there. I was just like I said when I talked about the divisions, I thought it was kind of. I'm not like super opposed, but I'm also not like super enthused. I kind of like this like 2-play or protected opponents. I think that's kind of fun. Because obviously with the divisions pretty much being no more, it means that, hey, we're gonna find a team, we're gonna play them for 2 years. But the other thing that I wanted to throw in regarding this, because I just noticed this, obviously UCLA and USC coming into the Big Ten, they also have two play opponents and one protected opponent. Granted, the protected opponent is one another. Makes sense, USC, UCLA. But their other opponents, so Nebraska and Rutgers for UCLA, and then Penn State and Wisconsin for USC. Now, I think the Penn State, Wisconsin for USC, I think that's kind of interesting. Because, look, USC is a pretty good program. They're probably the team that, if I were to say the team that I think could make the biggest impact on the Big Ten, joining, compared to all the other teams that have joined the Big Ten in recent memory, I think they're the one that could have the biggest impact. I think they are a respectable team. I think they're a team that could be competing for Big Ten championships, which is so weird to think about, but I think it's possible. UCLA, they're a decent team, but we'll see what ends up happening with them. I think, unfortunately, I feel like UCLA is going to go the way of, say, Nebraska or Maryland, where we add them and they just are not the team that historically they might have been. But I don't know. I'd love to be proven wrong because I would like to have more good teams in the Big Ten. That would be fun. That would be interesting. But I don't know. I think this is. I like the 2-play opponents and I like the protected opponent. I'm assuming the protected opponent is basically for until they want out, but the 2-play opponent to me is much more interesting because it's like, okay, years 2026, we're going to get another new set of 2-play opponents. And maybe, I don't know, Michigan State, I don't know where they're going to be. Maybe we throw in Northwestern or Purdue or UCLA or one of these other newer teams. But this is all, this is all a couple of years down the line. This is not this year. This will be the following year. But I thought it was kind of an interesting little twist on the scheduling. I thought it was kind of cool. That's all I have to say about that. Michigan State playing, what was it, Penn State and Indiana for the next 2 years, home and away. We've been playing them for pretty much every year for a long time anyway, so there's not going to be any immediate change. But I like this idea. I think it allows for some sense of, newness with the Big Ten and scheduling. And I already have my own problems with college football scheduling in general, in that it happens way too early and way too far in advance. But yeah, what are you going to do? But I think that's pretty much all I have for this week. We hit a lot of things. We hit many things. It was a very diverse show. But I think that's where I'm going to wrap it up here. If you enjoyed, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. We'll be back next week, and by we, I mean me. I'm using the royal we, of course. Come on, I'm royalty. Come on, you bow before my might. But yeah. So I'll be back next week again. So I was looking ahead in the calendar. So Seth is going to be gone the 20th and the 27th. And then it'll be July 4th. So July 4th, I'm going to just put this out there now. I'm not going to do a show on July 4th. Just not going to do it because I'm probably going to be doing other things. Oh, not to be that guy, but I'm probably going to be doing other things on Independence Day. So, not going to be a show then. So, Seth will probably be coming back July the 11th. So, looking forward to his return there, and hopefully the Tigers will not be totally dead by that point. Maybe they'll be interesting. I don't know. The problem is, and we've talked about this, once the Stanley Cup Finals could end tonight, so we could lose hockey, and then we're just NBA draft and NHL draft and the trade deadline, and I mean, we'll see. Things could be interesting, but the summertime is usually kind of the rougher point in sports. It's usually fall and October. That's usually the best time in sports. Basketball and hockey and baseball and football all at the same time. But we'll have to wait. As with all good things. I'm sorry, I just smacked my microphone. I don't know if that is like super loud, but I just smacked my microphone. With all good things, we must wait. But like I said, if you enjoyed, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. We'll be back again next week, and I hope to see you there. All right, have a good night, everybody. Bye-bye.